Welcome to Tales from the Fandom, a podcast that brings a special guest out of the multiverse and straight to you. And now your host, David Ginsburg.
You're a wizard.
Doctor Strange.
And welcome to Tales from the Fandom, the podcast that brings a special guest out of the multiverse and straight to you. Today's guest is a returning guest. We have Steve Brady Calhoun joining us from Panama City, Florida, on the day that we set our clocks back, daylight savings times. And we are here to discuss the movie that came out on Thursday afternoon or evening, and that would be Doctor Strange, the latest in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Welcome back, Brady.
Thanks, man. We need a time Eye of Agamotto time thing so we can get some more hours to sleep.
Absolutely. Right? I mean, I did not get any extra sleep at all because one of my kids decided that, hey, 5 o'clock in the morning still worked for him.
You've got like 6 kids now, right, too?
Yeah, about that, just divide by 2. But, they're all equally, it's like double trouble.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, I only have one, and he let us sleep in today, so it worked out well. But we wore him out yesterday, so.
Well, that's a good plan. Yeah. I mean, we tried to wear them out, but it didn't work.
I feel your pain. Okay, so Doctor Strange.
All right, Doctor Strange. First, before we get into the movie, were you a Doctor Strange comic book reader?
Okay. So Doctor Strange, for me, for most of my comic book reading, exists as like a supporting character. He's in the Infinity Gauntlet, the 6-issue series on which the entire Marvel movieverse is headed towards.
Mm-hmm.
And, he's always sort of around in the Marvel comics that I read growing up, but I never read his comic. His comic, I would pick up an issue or 2 of it and would enjoy it, but never like keep reading it. Like I remember one where there was like a green dude with horns was one of his apprentices, and I think Clea was there, who's like his magical girlfriend who's also an apprentice. Mm-hmm. But I only ever read like a couple of them, and I was like, these are too weird for me. And so eventually I read What Is It That Disturbs You, Stephen, by P. Craig Russell, which is a really great Doctor Strange comic. And the Strange Doctor Doom thing with Mike Mignola on art, I think it's Triumph and Tragedy, where they have to go fight Mephisto for the soul of Doom's mother. Another really good Doctor Strange comic. I think, somewhere along the way, Wizard or somebody was like, you must read these 5 Doctor Strange comics, and being a good 90s kid, I did.
Okay.
But, the character, I think, the thing about Doctor Strange is he's sort of the opposite of John Constantine. If you had a problem, you could go see Doctor Strange and he would fix it. If you had a problem in the DC universe and you went to see John Constantine, he'd most likely kill you so he could save the universe. You know what I mean?
Right.
So they're different. Anyway, what did you read the comic? And I'm reading I should say Jason Aaron's writing a pretty great Doctor Strange comic right now, where he's set up a situation where he sort of depowered Doctor Strange and killed a lot of the magic in the Marvel universe, and now Strange has to bring it back, which is always a good concept for a character like that. He's always been like, because he's a magic character, he's too powerful.
Right.
It's hard for him to fight these mundane threats when the next issue he'll be fighting the devil, or
right,
some kind of some creature that controls its own universe, like Dormammu. I have no idea if I'm saying. Did he say? Is it pronounced Dormammu?
I think it's Dormammu, but I could be wrong.
Fair enough. So tell me about you, man.
Doctor Strange has never been one of those comics that I picked up and read. again, with you, he's one of those periphery characters where he shows up in, say, the
Mm-hmm.
Avengers or Civil War or Spider-Man, and he is that character where the characters go to him for, hey, we need someone to teleport us out of trouble,
Right.
or guide us in the right direction, or tell me what I can do to achieve X, Y, or Z. So going into this, I didn't really have a solid foundation on his backstory besides that he's not he's I know that there's more Sorcerer Supremes based on just reading about like his current comic situation, or
Sure.
like Brother Voodoo's in there as far as like him being a Sorcerer Supreme.
Mm-hmm.
uh that there's more magic users, and I had heard that they were starting to like either depower him or depower the Marvel universe with magic
Right.
in the more recent stuff that they've been putting out.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I know he's like friends with like Captain America and Spider-Man, and he's integrated into like those New York based superheroes.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he's there. You know, one thing I thought of when you were talking about that is like, if anything big ever happens in the Marvel universe, there are characters that are affected by it. So, like, if there's this big, giant, whatever energy wave or explosion, or a villain does something incredibly dastardly, then some of these characters will sense it. And it's always like Spider Man, spider sense going off, and
Hmm.
Doctor Strange senses a disturbance in the magical force, and the Watcher standing there watching it, talking about it, right?
Right.
Like, that's how it works. That's how you know, like, so he always like pops up in the comic you're reading for like a panel going, "Oh no, this is very bad," and then
Right.
disappears, you know. And then the whoever the real hero of the comic is has to go solve it, you know, for the most part. The other one
Right.
I read, I actually just read it because Comixology, of course, has a sale. Is The Oath by Brian K. Vaughan, and that has a nice little run of 5 or 6 issues where he's got the cure for all the diseases on Earth, and he doesn't realize what he has, and then he has to sort of deal with it. So that was a pretty good Doctor Strange book. But I think the character um, has always sort of suffered from he's too powerful to make sense, um,
Hmm.
to 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 sort of sustain. You know, he's like Superman in the Golden Age, where he's just moving the Earth around. You know, he's like, oh, we got this problem. There's a rocket headed towards Earth. That's okay. I'll move Earth.
Right.
You know, um, I read the years ago. When I went through and read as much as I could of everything, I read the Steve Ditko, Stan Lee original stuff, and um, Ditko kind of famously is I think he's into like Ayn Rand or something. Very very sort of straight laced is what I've always heard, and was
Hmm.
really disturbed that the kids that were reading his Doctor Strange comics were like getting high and reading them because they were like, oh, this is far out, you know, because it was the '60s,
Right.
and so there's some interesting um, art that you could take. I guess you could take a trip on. I don't know. Very sort of nervous. You know, his characters are all sort of. He draws Spider-Man, the original Spider-Man, the same way, where it's so like almost creepy. Spider-Man in the Ditko years is a creepy character. It's Spider-Man. You know, he doesn't become like the superhero we think of him as until John Romita starts drawing him. And at that point, he goes from being a loser and who never gets a date to being like a college cool kid on a motorcycle with 2 girls because John Romita's riding him, and he's like, forget all this loser stuff.
Okay. So going from the comics now to the incarnation of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Doctor Strange. Did you like it?
Oh, I loved it. But I love. Let's start with. I have loved all the Marvel movies that have come out. the Marvel movies for me are like my this is like my Star Wars. I always tell
Mm-hmm.
people this. It's like, look, when I was a kid for 20, 30 years now, you know, if we were lucky, we got one superhero movie a decade. And I loved superheroes and I loved comics, and we'd get one a decade, you know, maybe.
And they wouldn't even be good
And
sometimes.
yeah, you're right. You'd get one and it would be terrible, and it would be made by people who hated the source material, who felt like they were slumming it to make my superhero movie. And and so when the Marvel Cinematic Universe started happening and started getting off the ground, and I was like, and we were all sort of like, they're going to make one or two movies a year, and they actually understand the source material, care about it, want to treat it with the respect that it, quite frankly, it deserves. Um, this is amazing, and
Mm-hmm.
so not all the Marvel movies have been like A plus, uh, fantastic, but I've walked into them wanting the comics to come alive on screen, and that's what they've given me. The best example of that is in this movie, where how in the crappy Sony, was it Sony or Fox Fantastic Four, where they had Galactus in it and they
Yes.
didn't show you Galactus?
Right.
Well, here we go. We got Doctor Strange. They've got Dormammu, who is one of the big major villains of Doctor Strange, and you get a whole 5 minutes or whatever of Dormammu, being this big cosmic evil entity. They don't. Um, they're not scared of it. You know what I mean? They're like, we
Right.
got to show it. We got to show what it looks like, and we got to, Now it doesn't. I mean, the thing that bothered me, like, people were like, you can't show Galactus because in the comics in the 50s and the 60s, he's a big guy in like purple tights with a weird helmet on,
Right.
and that's going to look crazy on screen. Well, like, yeah, you don't, you know, you don't have to make him look like that. Dormammu, actually, because I was just reading the Ditko stuff and I was like, oh, I want to see what Dormammu looks like. Do you know what he looks like, David?
I think he's just like a guy that's in like
Yeah,
flames.
he's got like white flames for a head, but he's like a man. He's got a man's body with like
Right.
green, like a green shirt and pants with like green Robin Hood boots. Okay, he looks ridiculous, and I mean, eventually he doesn't look like that. They redo him every, uh, a new artist comes on and redoes him, and new colorist or whatever, and they go, actually, if I'm making an evil entity that controls its own universe, maybe I should make it look a little different than a green dude with boots.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so, you don't have to make you don't have to make the character look like it does on screen, and you don't have to make the story the same. Uh, I mean, I guess we should. What are we gonna do? We're gonna like tell people, oh, there's spoilers. Hey, we're gonna talk about the movie.
Oh
Right.
yeah,
All
spoilers.
right.
Yep.
So hey, look, we're doing a podcast about a movie we just saw. We're going to talk about it. Don't be stupid. Um, so like they tack on a love interest. Who's it? Rachel Adams.
Rachel McAdams,
Rachel.
who played Christine Palmer.
Yeah. I mean, I don't. Again, you're talking to I don't know that I've read enough to have ever seen this character before in the comics. Certainly in the origin stories I've read with Doctor Strange, there's not some other doctor, female doctor that he's in love with that tries to help him. I haven't run across that.
Well, I did research that just to make sure, and she does show up, but she's a nurse.
Right. And um but the essence of the character remains the same,
Mm-hmm.
and that's sort of the thing about the Marvel movies that they always seem to get right. They understand what the essence of the character is, and you can change a lot of the details, but if you understand that here's what you're dealing with. You're dealing with a guy who's a man of science, who lives his life as a surgeon, who his whole being is that he's the greatest surgeon in the world or whatever, and because of his own sort of arrogance and stupidity, he wrecks his car, and he has this nerve damage, and he can't be a surgeon anymore, and he basically loses his mind, um, and tries to find a cure, and ends up becoming a sorcerer, training under the Ancient One. Um, there's a lot of talk online of, oh, they didn't want to, they didn't want the Ancient One to be an Asian guy, or they didn't want him to be a Tibetan guy,
Mm-hmm.
because China is a big movie market, and they would have been upset. I mean, I thought she did a great job, as the Ancient One, um, and I don't know that you could look at the 40-year, 50-year publishing history of the comic and be like, this guy's always been from Tibet. I'm not sure that's even
Right.
accurate. Um, although I would hate to think that they're making decisions because they don't want to make China mad, but I also live in the world, and what are you going to do? So the essence of Doctor Strange is correct, and that's a really good starting point. The fact that they had Baron, well, they don't call him Baron, do they? They just call him
Nope, they just
Mordo.
call him Mordo.
Mordo for the whole thing. I told somebody today, my wife and sister-in-law saw the movie today, and I was like, I guess he's probably going to get his knighthood in the next movie, and then he'll get his like baronhood
Mm-hmm.
in the third one. He can't be a baron yet, but you got him for the whole movie being a good guy. I was like really impressed with that.
Yeah.
Like they sort of, that was brilliant on their part. And in fact, the audience, I don't know about the audience you saw it with, but when he turns at the very end of the movie in the, I guess, the second end credit sequence, and he's
Mm-hmm.
a bad guy now, and he's killing people. The audience was in there was like gasping, you know. That,
Yeah, we had one person that watched it because we didn't have that many stick around afterwards, and I'm not sure why that was. But the one of the people in the audience was like, "Why can't they just let the sorcerers? If I mean, he's only using it to walk around and like live his life. Why can't Mordo just let him do that? Like, what's the problem with that?"
yeah, I mean, yeah, that was sort of the reaction of my audience. They did not want Benjamin Bratt to be hurt or killed. They're like, poor Benjamin Bratt, we barely knew ye. Um, you know, but um, I really I walked out going, loving the movie. And again, it's hard. I can't judge these things with like a critical eye because I generally walk out of Marvel movies loving them.
Hmm.
I was kind of, as I've sat and thought about it last, I saw it Friday night, I guess. As I've thought about it last 2 days, I did kind of sort of go, there was an awful lot of kung fu in that movie, and like, or magic fu,
Right.
and there is no version of Doctor Strange where he's like a kung fu dude, and like Doctor Strange like is generally sitting Indian style but levitating in the air, shooting spells off while Iron Fist does the kung fu. That's how that works on the comic page. But I mean, they had to give it. You can't have a comic book without a fight scene, and you can't have movies without characters sort of fighting. It would have been weird if they'd just been throwing spells at one another.
Right.
And I have never watched the Harry Potter movies, so I have no idea how they handle magic in the Harry Potter. I've never read the books. I've never watched the movies. I have no idea how they handle it, but I thought they did a really good job of sort of giving weight and danger to it. You
Hmm.
know, um, I enjoyed the scene where he astral projects and then guides her through his surgery, or her and the other guy through his own surgery. That's while
Right.
someone else is trying to kill him as an astral projection. That's straight out of the comics.
And
Um,
that was probably one of my favorite of the fight scenes, but
yeah,
it was that because I mean that's steeped in magic, and they're like you could do whatever you want as an astral projection. I'm cool with that. And then my second was when he trapped them in the mirror universe, and you have all the crazy mirror fighting upside down, inside. Like, those two scenes were, as far as the fight scenes go, the best that I enjoyed. I didn't really like the actual fight scenes when they're actually in the universe,
Right.
because of the same reason that you brought up. Doctor Strange is not really a fighter, and I'm glad that they showed him not really being able to do as much as the others, the zealots, were doing. So I appreciated that, but at the same time, it's like, and I know he trained for a while, but at the same time, he's not training for that long of a period.
Yeah, there's a suspension of disbelief you have to give to these movies where the character has to become the hero at the end of the movie, and so it's only got a 2-hour runtime. How long is he in there training? Does he? How far along should he be when he starts fighting that first? And I mean, that battle is basically the rest of the movie.
Right.
Once he's in that battle feels like it goes on for I'd have to go back and watch it again to really get an idea of it, but it basically is like he starts fighting in, what are they, in London or New York? I guess they're in New York.
They're in New York for the one where not Baron Mordo, Brother Voodoo, Drum, is the caretaker of
Was
that
that? See, I
sanctum.
didn't even realize that. Was that Brother Voodoo that gets?
Yeah, and that's why they killed him,
Mhm.
is because they're eventually he's going to be resurrected and he'll be Brother Voodoo.
Oh, that's smart. Um, I the thing I loved, and the thing the audience I saw it with loved, was that his cloak of levitation has a mind of its own in the movie.
Right.
Um, and someone, I read it online. I probably read it on IMDb. They were like, the Oath comic. It comes from the Oath comic. And I went and read that, and there's like a passing mention in that comic of like, oh, the cape is hanging out with the other enchanted elements. You know how it likes to hang out with them. But there's nothing in the comic, at least that I noticed, like there was in the movie where the cape is basically wiping him off and he's talking to it.
Right.
That was but that was brilliant. Like whoever thought of that needs to get their, we're not winning an Oscar, but we're getting a bunch of money bonus.
Yeah, I read a thing today about it, and they said that they were pulling inspiration from Aladdin and their magic carpet.
Yeah.
That they didn't want to make it equal to that, but just enough to give it, like, wiping the tears,
Yeah.
and doing like its little things that it did.
Yeah. Um and yeah, I mean, that could get really silly really quickly, but I
Hmm.
but I think they used it in the right context and in the right place. You,
Oh
you
yeah.
needed some levity in the midst of that movie. This was I think when I was telling somebody about it, I was like, this was a great movie. This is not a comedy, though.
No,
The way
absolutely.
that some Marvel movies are comedies. Guardians of the Galaxy is a comedy. Um, but this was like it had some light moments, but for the most part, it was pretty straightforward, serious action movie. Um,
Right.
I when she sends him when he shows up, and uh she has this arrogant doctor sitting in front of her, and she's like, well, I guess I'll show this guy the universe, and
Hmm.
she throws him through the 2001 A Space Odyssey door, I guess, and he flies through the universe. I thought all of that was great, and all of that felt like it was a Steve Ditko or a P. Craig Russell, scene. It was like, Steve Ditko and Vincent Van Gogh painted you a movie for 30
Right.
seconds, and or a minute or however long that sequence was. I saw it in, I had a debate. I don't like 3D, and I went and saw Civil War had a IMAX showing that wasn't in 3D. So
Okay.
so I went and saw that and loved it, and especially loved because I'm old and I'm going deaf. Um, they turn the sound all the way up in an IMAX theater. They crank it to 11. So when I was trying to decide what I was going to go to see this in, well, they didn't have any IMAX not in 3D, but I said, well, the heck with it, I'll go see it in IMAX 3D, and you know, we'll see how it goes. And I thought that was great. And I would tell anybody, actually, this one you need to go see in 3D because of all the
Uh,
cool um, visual things they do.
Right. I've heard that it's excellent in 3D, especially with those particular scenes of like the the traveling through the
Yeah.
multiverses and the fight scenes and that mirror universe. I've heard it's recommended in 3D. I cannot watch 3D movies. It's just it doesn't work. My eyes don't do it. So
Yeah.
I get to save a little bit of money
Well,
and headache and everything
I
else.
understand. Well, when I first put the glasses on, I thought, I'm not sure I'm going to make it through this because it was bothering my eyes. But
Hmm.
my eyes settled down and I was able to watch it. And I think there was a difference too in like some of the trailers were in 3D and some of them were like, oh, this is not good. This is not the good 3D. But then when Doctor Strange came on, it wasn't like it was 3D. It was just like I was sitting there in the scene with these people and they were, right in front of me throwing down.
I enjoyed the movie. Um, I did have one major problem with it, and I don't know if it's because it was an origin story or if it was how the character came out. Doctor Strange, when I was listening to him and when I was just watching the movie, felt like it was almost like another version of Tony Stark with the same arrogance, with the same snark, with the same like comedic timing that he had. I don't know if that's what they were going for, or if it's just how it happened. Because again, I don't read enough Doctor Strange to know if that's how he acts. Usually, he acts more like an advisor,
Yeah.
and he's like the sage, wise guy. And I just don't have that background. So at the time, I'm thinking, as I'm watching the movie, I'm like, well, Robert Downey Jr. is not going to be doing much more besides like showing up in Spider Man and doing the Infinity War at this point. Is Doctor Strange with Benedict Cumberbatch going to be that fill in snarky
Yeah.
character that they're going to have for like the next 3 or 4 years of movies?
Yeah, I mean, I've read that too. That people, the like the description everybody gives is, oh, they remade the first Iron Man,
Right.
and but they did it with a sorcerer guy.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, there's certainly some, you know, I can't tell anybody how to feel about the movie they just saw, and if that's what you saw in it, then that's what you saw. I feel like the difference there's a sort of a big difference for me in that Tony gets humbled in a way that you know people were like, "Oh, Doctor Strange got humbled." He really doesn't.
Yeah, I
you,
don't think he got humbled at
he
all.
doesn't get humbled at all. This thing happens to him, um, and he recognizes that at the very least he was a jerk to her. And when
Hmm.
he gets his life straightened out, he sort of says to himself, okay, I'm still in love with her and I should apologize for being a jerk to her. But he still is the smartest kid in the room. And he wants everybody to know he's the smartest kid in the room. And
Right.
I mean, yeah, Tony is, I don't know. For me, they felt different. I think the real key is, it's the first movie. So, give it a couple more
Right.
movies. When Tony tells a joke, Tony's just telling a joke. When Doctor Strange tells a joke, you should actually leave disturbed. It should be like a scary joke, you know. And I'm not sure they hit that mark, but I felt like that that's where that goes eventually. You know, uh, yeah. I mean, there's certainly a lot of similarities, but Tony was weapons manufacturer. You know what I mean? And he was like,
Mm-hmm.
he didn't care that his weapons were being used to kill people. And Doctor Strange is still a doctor. Now he's an arrogant um, doctor, but he still sort of saves people. And I think
Right.
where Tony had to have a change of heart to save people, whereas Doctor Strange had to, he was saving people no matter what, but he was only doing it, or he was doing it to sort of give himself glory,
Right.
and um, and increase his own sort of name and all that kind of stuff. So they're probably different flavors of the same thing, and I certainly think that you could walk away going, um, Brady's just splitting hairs, and no, those two characters are the same. But I do feel like they're pretty different.
I did like when he was upset after having killed
Yeah.
one of the zealots, and he's yelling and not wanting to do that, and then at the climax he figures out a way around
Mm-hmm.
having to kill and sets up the time trap for Dormammu,
Yeah.
and he's like, I'll just do it all day, to eternity, you're basically trapped. And I liked that. And I liked where he made that connection of, you know what, I can still be a doctor and uphold the oaths that I've taken
Mm-hmm.
and work around it.
Yeah, exactly. And that is an important aspect of the character. The character's a doctor. He's not a killer. He's not. He's really not supposed to be much of a fighter. He fights these sort of existential threats like
Mm-hmm.
nightmare and devils and demons and those kinds of things. And you're supposed to come to him with this mystical problem that only he can solve.
Mm-hmm.
And he can heal you in some fashion. So that should theoretically make him different than Iron Man, which is a character that is like, killing terrorists or whatever. Um, that scene at the end, that the way he figures out how to solve it, I thought that was great. I was really worried. Excuse me. I was really, really worried when they got to Hong Kong and he started turning back time. And
Mm-hmm.
I thought, oh my God, you guys have made this character way too powerful. You know,
Right.
what, you know, what situation will he ever be in now that he can't just solve by turning back time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then he figures out, okay, what I got to do is make a bargain with Dormammu, and I can solve all of this, and sets up that spell. Now, David, how does that spell work if you get killed?
Uh, I don't know. I imagine like it's a time loop, so maybe he sets it for a certain amount of time passing. Like, I'm going to give the all powerful entity of this dark universe or dark dimension a good minute
How long
before
was?
he wastes me.
Yeah, sure, fair enough. How long was the Enterprise trapped in that time loop where the ship blows up? How many did they ever say at the end? How many
I don't. I
cycles
think
they
it was.
went through?
I think it was weeks.
Was it weeks? It
I
wasn't.
I
It
I
wasn't
think it.
years, was it?
No, it was weeks. If we're talking next
Right,
generation, that
right.
time loop, yeah, I believe it was weeks.
Uh, yeah. So I mean, if you're gonna steal from one of the good episodes of Next Generation, right? Um, yeah. That when he did that, I was like, everybody, me and the audience, realized how brilliant that was, and the fact that he said, Dormammu keeps killing him. I really enjoyed that. I
Yeah.
thought it was going to be like 3 or 4 times, and then Dormammu would give up. But no, no. I mean, they killed Doctor Strange about 10 or 15 times in the climax of that movie.
In
And,
gruesome ways, like not
yes,
not just like the same way, just he Dormammu was trying every different way to figure like maybe there's a way to get around this.
yeah, and they, when Strange says to him, I look, I'm here for the duration. You can kill me as many times as you want to, but you're trapped here with me in this moment forever,
Mm-hmm.
unless you come up with a bargain with me. That was a great hero moment.
Oh yeah.
You're just like, oh, awesome.
Well, because he's finally giving in to the Ancient One's teaching of there's something more, there's something greater.
Yeah. Um, the well, we're talking. At one point we're talking about changes from the comics. In the comics, his hands are never really healed. Like he goes. That's sort of the like gaping plot hole of like going to see the Ancient One to get your hands fixed is or to get something healed or whatever is actually in the comics the Ancient One never heals anybody, he just turns them all into sorcerers.
Right.
And so, like in the comics, his hands are not fixed. He can't go back and be a surgeon anymore. He just accepts that, the reason his life has changed and all that is that he was meant to be the sorcerer supreme. Um, but of course, in the movie, they had to sort of give a reason for him to go, and they stuck with that. Well, we'll give him Benjamin Bratt running around playing basketball.
Right.
Um, So that was and I mean, yeah, they had to sort of uh, suggest at least that he could get his hands fixed and go be a surgeon again. I mean, it made sense, but at the same time, I sat there watching it, going, actually, the Ancient One is a terrible doctor because no one's no one's ever really healed when the Ancient One's done with them. They're just a great sorcerer. Um. Anyway, all right. What else?
Well, obviously, at the end of the movie, we saw the next movie that Doctor Strange is going to be showing up in, which is Thor, the Ragnarok movie, which is November 3rd, 2017. So we'll have to wait another year for Doctor Strange to reappear.
Is that not the next? What's the next Marvel movie?
We've got Guardians of the Galaxy number
Oh
2, which
yeah.
is in May, and then Spider-Man Homecoming in July.
So we have 3 Marvel movies next year.
Yes, in fact, I'm looking at the calendar now. It looks like we've got 3 next year, and then at least 3 in 2018.
What are the 3 in 2018?
Black Panther, and then Avengers: Infinity War, and then Ant-Man and the Wasp.
Ooh, Ant-Man and the Wasp. Ant-Man is the Marvel movie that I love the most. Like, not love because it was the best Marvel movie by any stretch of the
Mm-hmm.
imagination, but when the trailers for Ant-Man came out, everyone I knew said to me, "That movie's going to be terrible. That
Yep.
movie looks horrible." And so I have a teenage sister-in-law, which is a long story, but I have a teenager who's a sister-in-law, and she likes the Marvel movies, and she hates. She told me she would never see Ant-Man.
Right.
I'm never going to watch it. That's terrible. And so before Civil War came out, because she really wanted to see Civil War, I said to her, "I'm not taking you to see Civil War unless you watch Ant-Man." It's like, you have to watch Ant-Man. I said, there will be stuff in Civil War that you will not get, which I was basically lying. It wasn't true, but that's okay. She didn't know that at the time. But I was like, there's stuff you won't get unless you watch Ant-Man. So she watched it, and uh, she turned to my wife after it was over, and she was like, "Don't tell Brady, but I loved that movie." And I had a friend, Lou, was the same way. He was like, "That looks terrible. I'm never watching it." And finally, he caught it. I don't know if he watched it on HBO or whatever, but he caught it at home one time, and he was like, he came in later, and he's like, "That was really good." And I was like, "Guys, um, they they have made some. Certainly, they have made some B- movies, over the years." But even the B-C movies are good. They're fun,
Right.
which is the thing that the DC movies have failed at. You want to go see a bunch of people dressed up in costumes and fighting supervillains. You need to have a sense of humor about it. Um, so, yeah, Ant Man 2. I'm all in. Um, but I'm all in for all of them. So there you go.
Well, I'll tell you that the Thor clip is pulled directly from the Thor movie, from what I did my research on the internet before we recorded. So that clip of Doctor Strange talking with Thor is from Thor Ragnarok.
Is Hulk going to be in it? Because I'm not sure I'm going to see it if Hulk's not in it.
Yes, Hulk is in it, including characters from Planet Hulk, the comic book.
Ooh, we're getting some Planet Hulk action.
At least two of the main characters from Planet Hulk will be in the movie, and apparently, from the reports I've read anyway, Thor Ragnarok is going to be mostly Thor and Bruce Banner going through the cosmos of the multiverse.
Oh, wow.
And potentially, I imagine running into Thanos at some point, because he's got to start collecting Infinity Gems.
Yeah, he's been really lazy about this Infinity Gem plan of Infinity Stone, David. I will correct you. Infinity Stone. They don't have Infinity Gems. Did you suspect the Eye of Agamotto was an Infinity Gem?
Not until they mentioned it. Not until Wong brought it up.
Yeah.
And I did like that Wong at least made reference to, like, oh, you have no idea.
Yeah.
And then I was reading, I don't know what, I think I was reading like Entertainment Weekly's like breakdown of Easter eggs and whatnot. And they were talking about, now that there's no ancient one, was she, or whatever you want to call her, I mean, she could have been a she, a he, or whatever. Was the ancient one the only thing stopping Thanos from coming after the Eye of Agamotto?
Yeah.
And because now there's no one has been named a Sorcerer Supreme at the end of the movie.
Right.
Like, Doctor Strange is still just Doctor Strange.
Yeah.
And he's in charge of the New York like temple or whatever. Yeah. The Sanctum.
The Sanctum Sanctorum.
Yes.
Stan Lee has to alliterate everything.
So they said, well, now that's a perfect opportunity for Doctor Strange to be involved, even if it's like at the start of, say, Infinity War, with Thanos like going after that first, because it's like maybe even the least guarded of the stones or the gems, whatever.
All right, can we talk about Infinity Gauntlet for a second?
Sure, we'll talk about anything. It all ties in now to Doctor Strange.
Well, because in Infinity Gauntlet, one of the coolest scenes in Infinity Gauntlet is at the start, where the Silver Surfer crashes into Doctor Strange's Sanctum Sanctorum and is having a nervous breakdown. And he's like, Thanos is coming. And he's going to kill all of us. And Strange has to, do his thing and make him better, and then gather all the, Strange is the one who gathers all the heroes together, and like, all right, well, him and Adam Warlock, who I guess is really not going to be in this movie, universe. I don't know what they're going to do. We'll find out in Guardians of the Galaxy 2. I mean,
yeah, that's the key.
They don't have the access to the Silver Surfer, so I'm guessing Vision is going to do a lot of the stuff the Silver Surfer did. And the Adam Warlock character, that still remains to be seen, but they haven't introduced him so far. So,
well, there was like the Easter egg maybe in Guardians of the Galaxy with the collector of like the weird thing, along with Howard the Duck.
I mean, I assumed that Adam Warlock was going to be what's his name's dad from Guardians of the Galaxy. So that was my assumption, that Adam Warlock would be his dad. But they've haven't they cast like Kurt Russell as his dad at this point?
Yeah, apparently, again, spoilers for people who are listening, but apparently his father is, at least in the movie version, Ego, the living planet.
See, I don't know that I believe that either.
But
I think that's just James Gunn messing with people. You know what I mean?
There's always redirection.
Yeah, that his dad is going to be the living planet. I don't have any. I just don't know. How do you do that, David? How do you sex up a planet? It's a whole planet. That seems difficult. But maybe James Gunn can get it done. I don't know. Okay. I mean, we're not going to beat How Do You Sex Up a Planet. I think we should just call it.
No.
All right. We got anything else?
So with Doctor Strange, what do you want from the next one? Because it's not going to be if they do a Doctor Strange movie again, like a Doctor Strange 2.
Yeah.
It's not looking like it's going to be happening until at least 2020, 2021, because they've got everything up to Captain Marvel and then the untitled Avengers sequel, since they've changed it from Infinity War 1 and 2. And then of course they've got the Inhumans, which they pushed off to the back burner to Phase 4, whatever they're going to call Phase 4. Which I imagine they would have a Doctor Strange, a Guardians of the Galaxy 3, a Black Panther, maybe a second Captain Marvel.
Yeah.
So what would you want to see from a second Doctor Strange movie?
Okay, so what I want to see from the second Doctor Strange movie is basically what I wanted from the second Hellboy movie that I didn't get. Now, I loved both Hellboy movies, but Hellboy was it was great as a comic because they would do these like 10-page sections and he'd go fight like a troll with iron shoes. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of the same thing I want from the Star Trek movie universe that I'm never going to get. In that these characters should have like little side missions over and over again, and that should just be the movie. The movie should just be, you know, 10 or 20 minutes of him dealing with this thing, this weird, he fights Nightmare, for 10 minutes and
Mm-hmm.
deals with that, and then fights another, three or four different versions of his villains. And then there's some overarching. The problem is you can't do that's a TV show. That's not a movie. I mean, I know
Right.
bad, and I'm terrible at this, but I guess what I'm trying to say is that um, I want these little like um, small subplots that you get in the comics. Where somebody shows up on Strange's door and he has an eye sticking out of his head. Wait, that was an Angel episode. But regardless, that's what I want. I want these little bits of the comic. And I don't. I know it's a movie, and you got to have one big bad villain, and you kind of have to, and they have to fight the villain for the whole movie. But that's exactly. I want it to be a little less of. I mean, the whole second half of that movie was one long fight scene, and
Right.
that kind of bothers me. Um, but every moviegoer is different. My wife was annoyed at the death scene for the ancient one. She was like, "It's too talky." I'm just like, "It's a death scene. You gotta, so glad they gave, they shared that beautiful speech about, even she does. She's however old she is, and she doesn't want to die, and she's slowing everything down.
And she just
You know,
wants to watch the snowfall.
yeah. I mean, it's beautiful, and moviegoers like my wife are like, get back to the sorcerer kung fu. I need some more of that. So I don't know, man. You know, but I walked out of the theater jazzed, which is all I can ask for. In the second movie, uh, I don't know what I want. Um, which is, it's good not to walk into these things wanting something.
Right.
You walk in wanting, it has to have this in it, or else I'm unsatisfied. Um, you're
You're just going to be
you're just gonna
unsatisfied.
be unsatisfied a lot of the times. That's the way I was with everybody loved the third Abrams Star Trek, and I left unsatisfied. And they were like, "Why are you unsatisfied?" It was another one of these Abrams Star Trek movies. It wasn't bad, And I was like, "No, it wasn't bad, but I wanted X, Y, and Z, and all they gave me was A and B. Um, I don't know what I wanted, but I didn't want that. You know, um, I don't know. I mean, he could have a fight with Baron Mordo.
Yep.
Baron could be a Baron. That could work out. And that's uh, I don't know who else there is like. What I want is for him to team up with Doctor Doom and rescue Doctor Doom's mother from hell, but that's probably not going to happen since
Yeah, Fox has that one.
what I want out of life is for Fox to go, okay, we can't make a good Fantastic Four movie. We're going to make the Sony deal with Marvel, and you can have the
Hmm.
characters back. That's what I
Right.
want because Marvel could make a great Fantastic Four movie, which I think the world really needs. What the world needs now is for this election to be over and for there to finally be a great Fantastic Four movie. That's
All
what I
right.
want.
Now, with Doctor Strange being out, does it change like your top 3 Marvel movies? Because I've heard from a lot of people that Doctor Strange is now in their top 3 as opposed to where their top 3 rankings were
All
previously.
right, you tell me your top three first. Let's start there. What are your
Okay. My top 3 is Captain America, Winter Soldier is number 1.
okay?
Number 2 would probably be Guardians of the Galaxy, with the caveat that I've always loved the space side of the Marvel universe.
Okay.
And then number 3, I would probably put either First Avenger, Captain America again, or Thor, or maybe even like Iron Man Avengers. Like that third spot is really hard to pin down.
Yeah.
Uh, but the first 2 Captain Americas are fantastic. Even Civil War, which I didn't throw in there as a ranking.
Can you believe
Uh,
we live in a world where they made Captain America cool, and they made him a character you want to go see in the movies?
well, what
In the
blows me
comics,
away.
it was just like, oh god, it's Captain America. Like
Well, what
occasionally it
blows
was
me
cool,
away.
but very rarely.
Well, they started all this stuff at a time where the coolest characters were owned by different companies already. Spider-Man,
Right.
the Fantastic Four, and all of the mutants were already farmed out to Fox and Sony, and they picked characters which, mind you, the Avengers is not like the rinky-dink bunch of these people, but Iron Man, Captain America are not at the front of
No, man, it's always like Wolverine.
general public.
It's Wolverine, Spider-Man, um, maybe the Punisher.
Hmm.
Are their top three like
Or the Hulk from those that
yeah,
remember the TV show.
sure. But in terms of like comic sales, it's like Wolverine and Spider-Man, right?
Right.
And yeah, and then they picked the characters that always had, I mean, they were popular characters, but they were never like these monster characters that would be alongside like Batman,
Right.
and Superman to a lesser extent. Um, okay, so my top three are Guardians of the Galaxy.
Number one.
Number one is Guardians of the Galaxy. That
I'm
is,
shocked.
well, it's the best of the bunch. Um, it is the most fun of the bunch. It's the funniest of
Hmm.
the bunch, and it's also the
Definitely.
one that, um, I mean, I can watch that one again right now. Some of these other ones, I've watched them, and and I go through the whole cycle, and I watch them all, occasionally. But Guardians of the Galaxy, if I come into a room, Guardians of the Galaxy's on, we're watching it. I'm good. I'm set. The second one is probably the first Avengers movie. Um, A, it was a great movie, but B, it was the first time that we got superhero team up, and
Hmm.
it worked. Like nobody ever thought. Well, I guess they did it with the X-Men, but even with the X-Men, it was always just like, here's the Wolverine movie, and with some other mutant characters, right?
Right.
And it wasn't like a team book or team movie, excuse me. It was always like, here's Wolverine and Professor X, and we really want you to care about them. And oh yeah, there's some other mutants. And this was like everybody has a cool part in the movie. Everybody,
Hmm.
works together, fights with one another. It was the Avengers, like the Avengers is, which is they're always like they're teaming up to beat up the bad guy in the first scene, and the next scene is them bickering with one another because they can't get along. Which was in the '60s was just unheard of. The Justice Society always got along. Even
Right.
when they were racing one another around the world, they were always friends with one another. But the Avengers, they were constantly like bickering. They were constantly kicking the Hulk out of the group and letting him come back and kicking him out again, you know. And so Whedon, you know, got it. Of course he did, because he's a nerd like us. But he made a really great and really perfect Avengers movie. Um. Okay, so the spot number three. You're right. I mean, that would be hard to pick. I made a list. I ranked them all at one point. Before, I think, right when Guardians of the Galaxy came out, so it was before Ant-Man.
Okay.
Um, and I can't remember who was three on my list. It might have been the first Iron Man, just for like sentimental, just because, hey, look, this is the movie that launched the Marvel Universe, and you got to give it some respect.
Right.
I think probably the best. But if I were to say, okay, what's the best movie and the movie you most enjoy, and what's the movie you're going to watch next after you've watched Guardians of the Galaxy and the first Avengers, then it would probably be Captain America, The Winter Soldier.
Okay.
Um, because, again, that's a great movie, but it's a great movie in a different way than either the Avengers or Guardians of the Galaxy is. It's not a comedy. It's a action movie. It's a '70s spy thriller. Um, and you know, Captain America's slinging his shield like a boss.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Hitting guys, all over the place, making that thing bounce off walls. Um, so, yeah, I'm not sure that Doctor Strange would crack the top three. It would probably be in the top five. It might be four or
Okay.
five, but I'm not sure it displaced any of those three for me. Um, and part of that is because it's there's the all of these movies. The first one, they have to do the origin, right?
Right.
And um, they deviated a little bit. They had a little things they did here or there that were different. They had a lot of cool, unique stuff in it. But at the end of the day, this is the origin of Doctor Strange. That could have
Mm-hmm.
been the subtitle. Um, and so there's just like there's an hour of the movie where you're just like, yeah, now give me to the Doctor Strange being Doctor Strange. It's the same
Right.
same. It's not as bad as it's become with Spider-Man, where you're just like, oh God, please don't ever show me Uncle Ben getting
Dying
shot
again.
again. Please God, I never need to see it again. Um, and it's we're not that level, but at the same time, as much as I enjoyed the movie overall, I still was like, and I told somebody the movie didn't actually end this way, but in the trailer where he like walks up to the Sanctum Sanctorum window and
Mm-hmm.
he's fully dressed as Doctor Strange. What
Right.
I told Tony Simmons was that's going to be the end of the movie. The whole movie's going to be he gets closer to being Doctor Strange and he's almost Doctor Strange, and then at the end of the movie, yeah, he's Doctor Strange. And that was a pretty good call, because while that wasn't the end of the movie, that was pretty much what happened. The
Right.
whole movie is he's not really Doctor Strange until the end of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And there really wasn't any way around it. I mean, there's nothing you can do. You have to give you have to feed the audience the origin story. Um,
Right.
I I don't know what a movie would look like with if the movie had opened 5 years later and he's already Doctor Strange, and he just goes and does things and helps people, or fights a villain, or whatever, and they just do like 30 seconds worth of flashback.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what that movie would look like. And I'm not sure that would work, because it's such a fantastic and weird concept that I really think you have to feed people take them step by step through it, which is what they did.
Definitely.
So, eh. you know, yeah, I really enjoyed it. I mean, it's definitely it's in the mix. It's in the top five, and
Okay.
and I got to give all the props in the world to I can't say his name, and I'm not going to try, but to the guy playing Mordo.
Oh, it's a I believe it's Tweedle Ejiofor, but again,
Bless you.
that's my best
I
guess.
mean, if you say so, I'm not saying his name. I will mess it up, but he was really good, and you knew Cumberbatch was going to be good,
Mm-hmm.
and you knew what's her name playing the ancient one,
Tilda Swinton.
Tilda Swinton was going to be great. I don't need to know actors' names to be on a podcast, do I? That's not like a
Nope.
requirement. Okay, good, because I don't do that. But they cast like some real heavyweights in this thing. Oh. Okay, I have to rant. Can I rant?
Sure, rant
All right.
away.
And I sort of mini ranted before about this, but I'm tired of reading reviews from people who don't like superhero movies. Like they don't like the whole genre. And they go to the movie and they review it and then they complain about the whole genre. And it doesn't matter, generally speaking, how good or bad the movie is. They don't, it's like going to see a Western and then saying all Westerns suck. Okay? And like it's really been this real strain in like when I read reviews from people and they're like, you know, when are we going to get out of these superhero movies and get back to, and I don't know what they're trying to get back to because
It's not like it's not like those other movies went away.
yeah, well, that's number one. People are still making the other movies. Number two is if you're looking for like the '70s cinema that a lot of us loved, with The Godfather and The Conversation and some of these other like pre-blockbuster movies. Well, they haven't been doing that since the '70s. It's not
Right.
superhero movies that killed that. It was Jaws and Star Wars and the blockbuster. They
Mm-hmm.
started making blockbusters and they killed those. And just be lucky that they're doing them now on TV. That's what the golden age of TV is. It's all these sort of these shows that are arty and they're all character driven and they're not. I mean, you can find what you're looking for now. There are a million channels, okay? And so I'm just sick of people like, this any minute now the superhero genre is going to just fall apart. Nobody's going to go to the movies anymore. Like, no, yeah, okay, that will happen. Also, the heat death of the sun is coming. But in the meantime, let me just enjoy my superhero movie.
Right.
You got whatever you got out of movies. If you were a fan of westerns, you got 50 years of westerns before they died off. And if you were a fan of like weepy dramas, I know you got a good 20 or 30 years of those, and are still
Mm-hmm.
getting those every Valentine's Day. Okay? So cut me some slack and let me enjoy like the golden age of superhero movies without you complaining about, oh, I'm so sick of these. Just don't go see it. Go find something else,
Absolutely.
man. Go make yourself happy. This is America. Go be free someplace else away from me. Okay, I feel better. I need to get
All
off my
right. Last question.
All right.
We've got all these superhero movies coming out in the Marvel universe. We've got on deck, let's see here, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, Spider-Man, the reboot again, Thor, the introduction of Black Panther after Civil War, Ant-Man with the introduction of Wasp, the Captain Marvel female version, and then another Avengers movie. If Marvel came to you and said, Brady, we want to do a Marvel movie, but you need to pick a character that has not had a movie yet, who would you choose? Who would you tap to have a movie?
Forbish Man. Do you know who Forbish Man is?
No, I don't.
You really don't know who Forbish Man is?
No.
I don't really even think I know who Forbish Man is. He was like, I think he has like a mop bucket on his head. He was like one of the comic characters, and I may have been the Fantastic Four's janitor. I really
Okay.
have no idea. It was just a joke, and he always like shows up for like a minute. You know, he shows up in those what does. Did you ever read the
Okay.
what does?
Yeah.
Where
Or the what ifs?
no, they're not what ifs. They're
Okay.
what does, and
Nope. I don't think I ever read
they're like
those.
20 pages of like superhero jokes, and that's all they are. Okay, and God, you got to go yourself to Comixology or somebody and see if you can find them and spend 99 cents. Okay. I got to get some. I'm trying to open up water here so I can keep talking to you. So give me just a second. Talk amongst yourself. What would you do?
My pick would be Nova, but Richard Rider Nova. I've got to preface it with that. Either Richard Rider Nova, or I would go the route which they had announced as a movie series, and now I believe they're going to do it as a TV series. But The Runaways. Those would be my choices.
I never read The Runaways. I mean, all I've heard is good things about it, but I never read it.
Definitely first volume. The first run of it is excellent. After the first run, it goes into some different territory, and you either are going to like it or you're going to hate it, just depending on the art style that they have going on. But the first run is excellent, and in fact, one of the characters' mothers is in Doctor Strange as like a minor character, and it like I didn't even notice her, but I know that they had made mention of her before the movie had come out.
Okay. Um, why do you like Nova so much? Let's just do that. Tell me why Nova.
Man, New Warriors was my comic way back in the day,
Right.
and you had Van Sastrovic as Marvel Boy, who then became Justice. You had Star or Firestar, who was a member of the X-Men and joined the group. You had Speedball, who took a way darker turn after, like, at the start of Civil War in the comic book series. You had Namora, who was related to Namor,
Mhm.
and then you had Richard Rider as Nova, and I loved him in the series. He has always like great comic relief and this really cool like space character based on Earth. But what drew me to him was I believe is like the Annihilation Wave or Annihilation War, that series where it's him, Guardians of the Galaxy, Ronan the Accuser, and they're all coming together to fight Annihilus, who's come out of the negative zone to kind of like destroy all that we know of what's happening in the Marvel Space Universe. And I love that. Like I loved Nova, I loved the Guardians of the Galaxy comic that spun out of that whole series, but I've always loved Nova and Richard Rider as Nova.
Yeah. Very cool. Okay, so I got like five answers here. I mean, no one's made a good Incredible Hulk movie. Just
Right?
standalone Incredible Hulk movie. Nobody's made one.
And
Uh,
they haven't tried since 2008 with Edward
yeah,
Norton's version. And I almost at this point, with how they're doing Thor Ragnarok and
yeah.
including Planet Hulk characters, they're not going to do the Planet Hulk movie, and everyone needs to get over it at this point.
Well, and they you just got to trust them at some point.
Right,
And even if they do it, they're never going to do your dream idolized version of it either. You
right.
know, um, I enjoyed Planet Hulk, but the Incredible Hulk for me is the Peter David 10-year run of the Incredible Hulk, where he, um, the sort of the climax of that run is he combines all the Bruce Banner and the Hulk and the Gray Hulk, which is something the movie folks don't know anything about, into this
Hmm.
one very powerful, smart, and somewhat, in low level insane entity, um, where he's just like smart, Incredible Hulk, right?
Right.
Which is you're like that shouldn't work, but it works brilliantly in the comics at least. Um, I really would like somebody to make a good Incredible Hulk movie. I'd really like somebody to make a good Fantastic Four movie. I think that would be the movie the Fantastic Four. If you had if you had Galactus, you had Silver Surfer, you had all the Doctor Doom, you had all the Fantastic Four characters, and you did it the right way, which is that Reed Richards is in his at the youngest, he's in his late 30s, and Ben Grimm is the same age. These
Mm-hmm.
are not teenagers, you know. Um, and Johnny, you could make you got Johnny Storm there as the teenager, you have to
Right.
figure out a way to sort of make that 1960s Cold War era where they're blasting themselves in a rocket in space because they got to beat the Ruskies. You got to figure out a way to do that. I kind of think, I honestly kind of think the best way to do it is sort of like what they did with Ant-Man, in that um, there's sections of Ant-Man that take place in the past. They don't tell you how old the past is, but it's in the past. And
Mm-hmm.
you have original Ant-Man, and I think the way you do that is part of me thinks, well, you just have the Fantastic Four and you just set it in the past. Um, you set the origin in the past.
Right.
Um, I don't know. That's hard to do because, of course, they want all the characters to be in the same sort of ongoing present. Um, so I don't know. I but I think that would be for somebody to do those characters justice, because those characters were they're the foundation of the Marvel universe. They're the first comic in the superhero version of the Marvel universe. Jack Kirby and Stan Lee did 100 amazing issues on that, with those characters, and then John Byrne, Walter Simonson, and a bunch of other people. You know, God rest them. Those are the ones that I read as a kid, were the John Byrne and Walter Simonson ones. Um, but lots of people have come along and done great things with those characters, and it sucks that um, they haven't nobody's done them justice on the big screen during this superhero renaissance.
Mm-hmm.
um I mean, Ghost Rider's on Agents of Shield now. He's
Yep.
not my Ghost Rider, I suppose. But that's it's okay. Then a lot of the Marvel Netflix stuff is really good. I enjoyed Luke Cage. I've enjoyed the Daredevil, the two Daredevil series we've gotten. And I think Iron Fist looks great. I really do. There was, I don't know what the resistance is, but there seems to be some resistance in showing the TV characters in the movies, because they had, unless I missed her, they had a whole movie set in a hospital with Doctor Strange, and they didn't have the night nurse that's in the Daredevil shows show up.
Right.
And when I left later on, when I was thinking about it, I was like, why is she not there in like a cameo? I'm sure I know Rosario Dawson's busy, but I'm sure they could have found, like, hey, come on by. So I don't know, but there seems to be some kind of like power struggle or disagreement about, you know, well, you guys are the TV heroes and you're going to stay there, and we're the movie heroes, and never the twain shall meet. Um, but I find that annoying.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm trying to think, and I can't. I mean, they really have. I mean, they have gone through the well at this point. I mean, a Fin Fang Foom movie would be great. Just a giant dragon with shorts. you know, I mean, he's just a dragon with shorts. What do you need a dragon with shorts, knocking down cities, I guess. I don't know what Fing Fang Foom does in his off time, but you know, he you got to find out what he's carrying in those shorts. Like, that would be the secret of the movie. That would be like the what's that thing in Alfred Hitchcock movies? They're all chasing something. The The
I couldn't tell
MacGuffin,
you.
the MacGuffin of the movie
Okay.
is what's in Fing Fang Foom shorts. Everybody wants to know. He could fight Iron. I think he fights Iron Man a bunch.
Yeah, Fin Fang Foom is one of Iron Man's main villains, besides like the Mandarin and a few others.
John Byrne did a whole section of um, Iron Man fighting dragons, and the Mandarin not realizing that he's working with the dragons. Not realizing that the Mandarin thinks he's the big bad guy, and there's some old Asian dude who's really a dragon who's manipulating him. Those were good comics. Um. Okay. Okay. Back to Doctor Strange. I have one other complaint.
Okay.
Mordo is correct when he's like there are too many sorcerers, because there are a lot of sorcerers and that Wong is a sorcerer. She's
Right.
not in the comics, and I mean I understand. They didn't want to give the white hero an Asian butler.
Right.
I mean I get it, and they shouldn't. It's kind of racist or really.
Well, at one point they had considered cutting Wong completely out of the movie.
Yeah,
and then they worked him back in.
Well, I mean, the Green Lantern sidekick in the comics, at least in the 50s and 60s, was Pie Face, right? That was the character's name. And I can't think of a more racist name for an Asian character than that. So I mean, unfortunately, a lot of these comics were made in the in the good old days. When white guys made them, and they did incredibly racist things. So the Wong character is that's that I think they did the best they could with that, but I also think it was kind of weird that everybody was a sorcerer. Just it's like one of those movies where everybody's a mutant.
Right.
It makes your hero less special if everybody's one. But I thought Wong was great. Wong listening to Beyonce forever.
Yes.
Right?
God. That Wong, between the Beyonce CD listening and then the end part where he's like, "Oh, I'm glad I'm not dead." Keep doing that.
Yeah.
Keep doing what you're doing, Yeah. I'd like to see more of him in the second one that they eventually make.
Yeah, you're never seeing him again, and all these movies where Strange just shows up and helps. Wong will not be in any of those. I mean, you can almost guarantee it, right?
Yep.
Yeah, he they did some great stuff, and they took some stuff that could have been hard to do, and they dealt with it. The other here while we're ranting, and you can join me and have this argument or not. I can completely understand, but why are people upset that Iron Fist is white? Have you read that?
I have read that they were upset at the casting of the character who played the Knight of Flowers from Game of Thrones. I can't remember the actor's name at this point.
Okay, so here's the thing. Some of these characters, I think they could change who they are, and there needs to be some racial balance to these. Like the Avengers are too white, and a lot and what was it that they're making this movie about the Great Wall of China where for some reason white Matt Damon saves all the Asian people, right? And I mean, I get it if you're upset at that, but you have a character like Iron Fist, which the whole point is that he's this this white dude who's fish out of water, and he learns kung fu. I don't on one hand I think okay, you can make the character Asian and that's fine, but I also think if you make the character Asian, then people are just going to be like, oh, what a stereotypical Asian character that is.
Right.
He's a kung fu guy who beats up bad guys. can't you find anything better for Asians to do in, movies and TV? And at which point, now we're just a snake eating its own tail, where it's like there is no good solution to this, short of, people, whether it's, uh, you know, Asian people or African Americans or any other minority, making their
Mm-hmm.
own characters, um, because you're dealing with characters that were all made in Iron Fist is from the 70s. So you're dealing with characters from the 60s or 70s, and they were mostly made by white guys.
Right.
So they have a lot of mostly made by white guys who grew up in the 40s problems. Um, and you're not going to overcome that until you start, you know, dealing with characters that weren't made in the 60s or 70s. So anyway, I've enjoyed. I honestly hope that what happens in a lot of the Marvel universe is that as the initial characters get older and the actors leave, that they're replaced with, you know, minority characters. I hope the Peter Parker Spider-Man is replaced, in 2 or 3 movies with the Miles Morales Spider-Man.
Which I would love.
And I think that's the way to handle it. I think that, the Marvel Comics has sort of figured this out, and they already have these other characters ready to go. They've created a Iron Man that's an African American woman.
Yep, the smart. Apparently, from what they described, she's now the smartest character in the Marvel universe. I believe her name is Riri Williams.
Right. And so they've done a lot of this in the comics, and people should read the comics. And the movies are always going to be sort of sent towards this general audience size, whatever that is, to make everyone happy. Whereas the comics, they can make a comic that's just for you.
Mm-hmm.
I forgot where I was going with any of this, and probably should have just kept my mouth shut the whole time. But I don't know. I think it. Okay, so sequel to Doctor Strange, he finds out what's in Fing Fang Foom's pockets. That's what we need to find out in the sequel to Doctor Strange, and then we get Marvel had a whole bunch of monster characters, so all of them. He goes and fights Man Thing. Who thought Man Thing was a good idea? The name of the character. I want to know which one did. I think I read somewhere that Swamp Thing and Man Thing actually showed up at like the same time. Like the one of them is not a ripoff of the other one. That they literally were published in like the same month by different, writer artists, and but they're both like swamp creatures, and you're like, how did that happen? And why did somebody think Man Thing was a great name for a character?
that's it's just crazy. I don't know. I'm looking at this, and yes, you know what? Man Thing showed up May 1971, and Swamp Thing showed up that same year. And I believe Swamp Thing showed up July 71.
That's crazy.
Their first appearances.
I don't know. I don't know that I have read enough Doctor Strange to be able to tell you what a great Doctor Strange sequel would be, or answer any of the other questions that you asked. You had great questions tonight, and I think I had nothing but terrible answers for you. But
whatever.
Such is life, man. Yeah, Doctor Strange, go see it.
Definitely.
Get it done.
Go see it, and then wait for Guardians of the Galaxy next year.
All right. Cool beans.
All right. Thanks a lot, Brady.
All right. Thanks. See you later.
Thank you for listening to Tales from the Fandom. Subscribe to us on iTunes or your podcast app of choice. Follow us on Facebook at www.tales facebook.com/Tales from the Fandom to see photos, links, leave feedback, and check out upcoming guests. If you'd like to be a guest, email David at talesfromthefandom@gmail.com.